Hey, how you doing? I'm Adam Post, publisher of College of the Dead, publisher of more than 1,000 independent comic books, somebody who has been selling comic books to comic book stores over the last 35, well, I don't know, a long time, decades. And wow, so DC Comics has announced they are cutting off Diamond Comic Distributors. And that is kind of a big deal. I'm going to explain why. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications. Comment below, see what you think of the review of this video. So look, DC Comics is getting cut off by DC Comics cuts off Diamond Comic Distributors. What does that mean? So DC Comics has announced to comic book stores it's no longer going to work with Diamond Comic Distributors. This is an article coming from ICV2. The guys who published this used to run Capital City Distribution, and they used to distribute DC Comics. They used to be 20 comic book distributors in the late 80s and early 90s, and then that all changed in 1995 when Diamond Comics became pretty much the only comic book distributor. Thanks to DC. DC kind of decided they would save the industry by letting Diamond have the exclusive. It's a long story, but now DC, under its new owners, has decided they do not want to distribute through Diamond Comics Distributors anymore. They don't want to do it exclusively. They don't want to do it a little bit. We already have two other distributors that they helped establish, and they want those distributors to sell to comic book stores. And they are also going to use Penguin book distributors to handle their graphic novels to comic book stores. Well, yeah. You know, this came about during the big health event that we've all been going through over the last 2 months. DC, when Diamond announced it was shutting down temporarily to deal with, the virus and all that, I did a video called DC Comics Kills Comic Book Stores. And why did I do that? Because DC Comics was announcing that they were going to sell through these two distributors while Diamond was closed. But the thing to know about these two distributors is they actually are just separate companies set up by mail order comic book retailers. So they made a decision, and that's what my whole video here was about. They made a decision to focus on selling to these mail order retailers. And that's really, really significant because what they're saying basically is they don't think that selling to comic book stores is even really a real business. I mean, even though they generate money from it, even though it generates some volume, they look at it and say, well, you know, there are no big businesses that have chains of retail stores of any size. There's some people that have 5 comic book stores. Some guy has 8 comic book stores. But there are no public companies that have comic book stores, not even comic book store divisions. There are no franchises you can buy to set up a comic book store. It's not considered to be a serious business. It's considered to be like a hobby kind of business. So DC made the decision like, all right, well, if that's the case and our number one single distributor, Diamond Comic Distributors, can't help turn it into a real industry, then we may as well sell to the guys that are selling directly to consumers and focus on those people. Midtown Comics and this other company called Discount Comic Book Service, which each created a company so they could then go ahead and have a separate company to do distribution. So what they're doing is, in working with those two companies who are mail order retailers, they're forcing comic book stores who have physical stores to kind of be a separate priority, a lower priority, like a garage sale. Like, all right, well, yes, we know that people sell our stuff online and through mail order, and that's our priority. But there are also these guys that sell out of the back of a truck or a small store, and those are not serious people. That they're really not treating comic book retailers as serious people. And I've known some comic book retailers, and they're good people. They definitely spent a lot of money buying my comic books, but unfortunately, the business, while there have been small public companies that have pursued trying to create franchises for comic book stores and have owned comic book stores, and there have been some attempts over the last 25 years or so, it just never worked. There are reasons for it without getting into it in great depth, but the bottom line is it's always been a very, very small, relatively small cottage business. So DC Comics is looking at what they're doing and they're saying, we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on selling to the mail order people. The big difference with the mail order people as well is they sell their comics direct to consumers at a high discount, like 40% off of the cover price. So the people who are buying comics through mail order companies are getting them at such a cheap price that even when they have $5 and $10 cover prices, they aren't really $5 and $10 if there's a 40% discount, are they? A $5 comic book with a 40% discount is $3. So how is a comic book store supposed to compete with that anyway? They can't. They just can't. And as far as the comic book stores go, I can tell you the way that a company like AT&T looks at it, who now owns DC Comics, is they look at it and say, well, look, I've got this mail order retailer who has like 30,000 customers. Why can't they just sell 1,000 stores comic books, or even 2,000 stores comic books, and just treat them like they're fans? Because there are fans that buy a lot of comics. Now, comic stores buy more than fans do. However, why not? And who cares? And unfortunately, that's what DC decided to do. Now, Diamond Comic Book Distributors has been in business a long time. They had a long relationship with DC Comics. It's unfortunate to see that they weren't able to kind of resolve things with Steve GEPPI at Diamond and let Diamond continue as one of their non-exclusive distributors, meaning like at least allow Diamond to be an option for retail stores if they want to still buy through Diamond, because there are a lot of conveniences for comic book stores to be able to get their comics from one distributor. Now, everyone who has a comic book store, if they want DC Comics, has to buy them through one of DC's other distributors, not Diamond Comics. But when I read this article, May 21st, with ICV2, it was an interview with Steve GEPPI. And Steve GEPPI was talking really tough. He was accusing Diamond, DC, of breaking their exclusive contract during selling comics to the other distributors during the virus. He was talking about how he has the world's biggest law firm behind him, and how DC Comics said they only want to deal with world-class companies, and kind of, speaking down a bit about the mail order retailers who didn't seem that confident about being distributors. That's the kind of thing that he got a little... I mean, I don't know their relationship, obviously. I know Steve GEPPI. I don't discuss this with Steve GEPPI. Let's just say I don't discuss this with Steve GEPPI. It's fine. But I will say, if you're going to be aggressive with a multi-billion-dollar company, you can do that. But the problem is, they may change their mind and just say, listen, forget it then. We don't want to work with you, which is what basically happened. You always want to, as a friend of mine who told me once, you always have to remember who is the dog and who is the tail in a relationship. Is the dog, when he wags his tail, is the tail wagging the dog, or is the dog wagging the tail? Meaning, you ain't the dog. If that's a multi-billion-dollar company, don't push them around, because they're not going to have it. And Diamond made an announcement about this also, where Diamond said that DC Comics terminated their relationship rather than answering questions. Now, with respect to the questions, I don't know what the questions are. No one told me. But Diamond did announce in April that they were going to be paying people, all of their vendors, late as a result of the health event and closing all the stores down. And that kind of thing is a big deal. It's a big deal to everybody in the industry when Diamond, who's never been late before and who's worked as like the bank of the industry, and I'll speak more about that in a minute, when they say they're going to pay late, it's a problem. It's a big, big problem. It means that a company like DC and every company who's dealing with Diamond, they had to think to themselves, am I going to continue to work with this company? Maybe there's something underlying here that's even a bigger, more serious problem. And, it really, it was necessary, I guess. I don't know Diamond's finances, but yeah, at that point where you owe somebody a lot of money, you are going to find that they are not comfortable about getting lots of questions peppered at them. So with respect, the other thing is Diamond openly and publicly, GEPPI accused Diamond Comics of breaking their exclusive agreement and violating it publicly. So when they follow up with questions like this, it's really often in business you do something like that to protect your position for litigation, such that Diamond could potentially have leverage to sue DC Comics or AT&T. The thing is, that is not good for communication. That's not good for a relationship. I'm sure, I can't say if it was necessary or not. It's just, it wasn't sounding all that great and all that rosy. And this issue where GEPPI is saying that Diamond was terminated by DC because they didn't want to answer questions. I mean, they terminated DC as an exclusive long before that. So you can't, as big as Diamond is, you can't push around a multi-billion-dollar company, apparently. Now, retailers' reactions have been, hey, this is terrible. And the reason, what does a retailer care? You know, if they get the box of comics every week and it comes from Joe Company versus John Company, or Diamond versus Gold Distributors, there's a good name, Gold Distributors. You know, what do they care? Well, they care because what happens is this is, you know, tracking and dealing with two different companies for your orders is a big deal, especially because the companies have different cultures. The new distributors, they're not really distributors. They're mail order retailers that are going to be drop shipping comics on behalf of DC. So their whole, the biggest thing the retailers are worried about is extra paperwork, timing the release of new comics, such as like, okay, well, DC just sent us a bunch of comics. Well, so did Diamond now, but now it's everyone else's comics. A lot of the retailers have to pay cash on delivery. Some of them have to even prepay. You know, it's ties up a lot of cash for them to try to manage those two distributor relationships. So alternatively, like Mile High Comics talks here in this recent blog post that Chuck Rosansky did about how Mile High Comics, you know, as recently as a few years ago, owed Diamond $1 million in unpaid bills themselves. And that's not uncommon for comic book stores. Comic book stores all the time can get behind in the bills. They're constantly getting new bills every week for new comics. And if those comics don't sell out, or if a customer says, hey, I want you to pre-order comics for me, but the customer doesn't pick them up, the store gets stuck with the comics. That's never gotten resolved. So a lot of stores get behind financially. So the question then is, all right, well, if stores get behind financially, who usually fixes that? Well, Diamond used to work with these stores, according to Mile High Comics' Chuck Rosansky, but also according to other retailers and certainly according to Steve GEPPI. But that's the expression of Diamond being the bank of the comic book industry. You know, they would help people who were behind and say, okay, just try to catch up a little bit over time. And because they had so much volume they were doing, so much sales, and there's so many efficiencies in just having one bill every week, Diamond was able to do it financially. But now, you know, how is Diamond supposed to help retailers? You know, are these retailers all going to really get the same available credit, meaning they can pay for the comics, you know, weeks later if they need to, if they get behind? Like, Diamond's not going to be able to back them up if they're getting these comics on, you know, much more restrictive terms from these comic book mail order retailer distributors. And there's another major issue, which is, you know, part of what makes business work is its overall efficiency that you get from economies of scale. So if whoever's familiar with it, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not familiar with it, it's basically this is, all right, if we ship, for example, you know, 500 pounds of comics somewhere, and it costs us, X amount of dollars to ship 500 pounds of comics. Well, shipping 300 pounds of comics or 350 pounds of comics is not, it's cheaper. It's only a little cheaper. So the more scale you do, the more volume you do, the more efficient everything is, where you can share all of your costs of overhead, all of your costs of labor, and doing less volume is a real kick in the teeth to Diamond Comics' profitability and also to their cash flow. So my greatest expectation of what the result of this is going to be is, I think there's about a 50-50 chance that Diamond and DC reverse themselves, and that GEPPI thinks it through and just decides, hey, I'd better apologize to people. And then it gets kind of worked out. It can't be that it's that far away, I would assume. So I would hope it would work out that way. If it doesn't work out that way, and there's a good chance that it won't work out that way, and that Diamond will still not be able to distribute DC Comics, that means that Diamond is going to have a lot less working capital, meaning they're going to have a lot less money in the bank to be able to help small retailers, even help medium or giant retailers like Mile High Comics, to be able to pay their bills late but still kind of stay in business. And that means they're going to be paying, look, I can't guarantee what's going to happen, but it's very likely they could pay other publishers late to make up for the lost revenue and the lost activity with DC Comics. It would just make them a little bit more unstable overall in terms of the overall how much money they have to work with to move through their system. But also it means that the profit margin on everything they're doing is going to be reduced even further. So they really have a lot of problems. Right now, as a publisher, I'm selling direct to consumer through College of the Dead. It's doing fantastic. It's shipping this month, June 2020. Really excited about it. It would be great to sell to comic book stores, but I would be a lot more nervous about selling to comic book stores through this distribution system than I was before all of this, before Diamond got this hit. So publishers have to be really, really careful and really ought to be focusing on direct to consumer, focus on Comicsgate, sell through Indiegogo, build your network, build your platform. I have a lot of videos on that, building your direct to consumer network and working with other publishers to build your business and your relationships. Secrets of the Comicsgate network, check the playlist. So I'll include links in the description so you can kind of check out more of this. But suffice it to say, this greatly weakens comic book stores, and it doesn't really make sense for any publisher to focus on selling through comic book stores as of June 6th, 2020, for sure. Before, it made a lot of sense to stay away from focusing on comic book stores. Now it's craziness. Direct to consumer is where it's at. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me your comments below. Let me know what you think of DC cutting off Diamond. I will see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.